for all.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Mayor Peterson is not able to be with us this evening, and I am filling in his absence. And after our public hearings, we'll be moving items 5.1 through 5.4 up on our agenda, and that will be after our public hearings. Okay, first of all, it's welcoming week in the city of Winona, and I believe throughout the country. And I would like to read a proclamation to present to Fatima Syed. If you two ladies want to come up around over here to this microphone. Okay, as we know, this week it kicks off the activities for Welcoming Week, and last night my wife and I had an opportunity to go down to the levee for, I guess, the initial kickoff, and it was a very, very good time. In the entertainment of the young dancers and the music and the beverages and the food was very, very good, so it was a good time. So, and then today, of course, also is Citizenship Day. Our city manager, Councilman Schulmeyer, they were at the Central Lutheran Church with myself in honor of Citizenship Day, and welcomed the new citizens to our community and how honored we are to have them, and our country is honored to have them. So, okay, a proclamation, City of Winona. Whereas the Winona community's success depends on making sure that all residents feel welcome. And whereas all people, regardless of race, gender, income, geography, national origin, or religion, bring fresh perspectives, new ideas, business, and a valuable diversity of life. And whereas across the country, communities are bringing together neighbors in a spirit of unity during National Welcome Week. And whereas Winonans working together can achieve a greater prosperity from rich and diversity of its people from around the world, and can cultivate a feeling of appreciation and value through that work. And whereas the Winona community fully embraces the American tradition of freedom and opportunity for all. Now therefore, I, Acting Mayor George Borzakowski, hereby proclaim September 13th through September 22nd as Welcoming Week in the city of Winona, and encourage all current residents to extend a warm welcome to new residents in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just...
Go right ahead. Microphone is yours.
Thank you. I just cannot walk away without really thanking you all for being so inclusive and celebrating new residents in our community and recognizing contribution of refugee and immigrants in our region. On behalf of Project Fine, myself, and all of us that are new in our community, thank you.
Thank you, Fatima. All right, this evening we have 3 public hearings we will be conducting. And public hearing number 1 is a public hearing to consider the resolution to levy assessments for unpaid charges. Excuse me, do you have anything to say?
I just wanted to remind the council,
Thank you.
we're planning to have a special meeting on October 23rd, so please let me know if that doesn't work for your schedule. And that's to discuss the Friendship Center and other capital projects. And then just wanted to thank our tree crew and I think some park and rec, our park maintenance folks who went and helped out at Woodlawn Cemetery last week after the tornado. And if anybody is able, if they could help out up there, I'm sure they would appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Monica, roll call.
Mayor Peterson, Councilman Thurley.
Here.
Moeller.
Here.
Alexander.
Here.
Iden. Here. Borzakowski.
Here.
Schulmeyer.
Here.
All right, as I mentioned, the public hearings, the first one is for unpaid charges. And Mary, you have any comments to share with us, or Jessica, before we open it?
So I distributed the updated list, the new amount with payments through 3/30 today is $239,581.96, and that's for 465 properties.
Okay, thank you. All right, I will declare the public hearing open. Anyone wishing to speak in regards to the unpaid assessed charges? Anyone wishing to speak?
Sure.
Wishing to speak, just step up to the podium. State your name and your address.
My name is Marcella Borgschatz. I live at 1301 Parkview Avenue, but I'm not here for myself. I'm representing two people that I help that both are on Social Security, have limited income and fixed income, and have not been able to pay the bills that have occurred with the water. And
Could you give us the addresses of that
okay.
property?
Should I take them one at a time? I think I'll start with Carol Fensky. Her street address is 562 East 3rd Street in Winona. And she's 84 and blind with diabetes and other problems. And she has a lot of bills. She has a large mortgage on her house that costs over $500 that's taken out of her income, and things like Medicare and insurance and property tax, all that stuff. I help her pay her bills, but there's just not enough to go around. And she has one son that's dependent on her. And anyway, there's no way that she can come up with $501. She is already down to $75, and I have to pick up medications for her that'll cost almost all of that. And I just wonder if there's any way of reducing that fee.
Now, you know this water bill now, that's the fee for the whole year. That just isn't like a 1 month or a quarterly fee. That
Yeah.
is covered for the whole year.
I realize that, and payments have been made on the water bill, but this month there were so many other things that were demanding attention that I had hoped for 75 or 100 somehow to be able to be paid on it, but that's not happening. Seems like her medications and expenses are just too great to, be able to squeeze that out. If anything, it'll be like $25 that could be paid this month.
Did you have another one too?
Yes, her daughter, Christy Fensky, who I am personal care attendant and nurse for. And
What's the address, ma'am?
her address is 721 East 3rd. And she's handicapped too and has a number of expenses and is only receiving Social Security for income. And There's a possibility there's some water running. She seems to hear it, I can't. I don't see where it's happening, but I'm on.
Ma'am, did you get a assessment charge for her? We don't see her name on this list.
What? Oh, well, it was
Is her-
named, well, I actually own the house.
Okay,
But, you know, she's the one that's living there and using the water.
And-
I mean, I use water when I clean her.
So
out
that would
for
be,
a
this would be under your name then?
It would?
Yes, because you
Oh,
own the property.
Okay, yeah, okay. Yeah, I see my name is on there, I get her mail, look at her mail too, so I just, yeah, it's her expense, and she does get bills, I think, for water. And it's she that is using it.
Have we come up with a name on this agenda yet here? I mean, on our list?
Yes,
here?
yes,
found
it's
it under
under,
her name.
it's under Marcella. Chats.
It's
Okay.
on page 3 under
Okay.
Marcella.
I'm just going to ask a quick question of you, Ms. Borchardt.
What?
591.
Is the property at 721 East Third that's listed under your name, do you own that property?
Yes.
So she's a renter?
No, not exactly, because 30% is already rented out, so I'm not allowed to do that. There, you can only have 30% rentals on a block.
Right. So do you live there?
No, I do not live there. She lives there, I have a different residence, I think I told you where I live.
Thank you.
Do you have another name? You said you had a couple?
No,
Just those two?
Carol is the first one, and
Okay.
really, I guess I'm more concerned for her because I suppose I have to take care of Christie's bill. But I would like some time on that.
Also, Carol Fensky has a special assessment for mowing, which would be towards the end of your packet.
Okay,
And that's
thank
for
you.
$318.88.
Okay, she had a fire at her house, and as a result, a lot of burnt stuff was on the property for a while it was being cleaned out and whatever. And she's unable to fix, to take care of that, and her son is not that reliable, so he didn't get it done on time.
Okay, Al, go ahead.
Quick question, if I might. Are you the legal representative
Oh,
of
actually,
this person?
I thought of asking her daughter Dawn. Dawn is POA, but I was busy helping Christie and taking care of various other things, and I didn't get that telephone call made. I don't know if she would have been able to come, but I wanted to come together with her, but that didn't happen.
So have there been any other social service agencies contacted regarding the fire, its aftermath, the circumstances that both these people are under right now? Have they been helpful at all with any of these expenses? Have they been contacted?
I don't know that her daughter tried anything. All she could suggest to me is ask to be put on a payment plan. I just wish some of that could be erased because she has multiple expenses and she's pretty unable to manage.
Well, now, the unpaid expenses, the water bills and the mowing and the other charges, that does get assessed to their taxes.
Okay, it's So it raises the taxes, which is also increasing her bill.
Yeah, I mean, I say, you
And the
don't,
bank will take that out, and they're already taking out, like I said, more than $500 for mortgage every month.
But it would be similar to a payment plan. Instead of having to pay it all at once, it comes out a little bit every month. Am I correct,
I
Jessica?
don't know, I'm really concerned about that steep 15% interest and 10% interest being added along the way, as if it isn't already bad enough.
So the special assessments are a one-year assessment for the utilities and the
Okay.
mowing. And so they would just, they would be billed by the county twice during 2020.
Okay, thanks.
okay.
The mortgage would be monthly. Your mortgage would be monthly, though. Yeah.
Okay, have anything else you want to share, or council have any questions? Okay, you can take your seat back and we will work through this as we go. All right, I called twice for a public hearing, and there's one more, your final time. Anyone here to talk about their water bill, mowing bill, whatever it may be? Okay, hearing none, we will bring it back to the council, and
I'll make a motion to adopt the attached resolution and levy the special assessments.
motion made by Michelle. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Paul. Further discussion? All right, hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, carried.
Item 2.2 is the emergency and overnight shelters ordinance amendments. This is also a public hearing.
Okay, who from, Carlos, you want to start us off here?
Evening, Council. For this item, staff requests Council review the ordinance amendments in your packets for emergency and overnight shelters as part of a public hearing. On August 26th, the Planning Commission unanimously approved the ordinance amendments that are in front of you. The Unified Development Code currently does not address emergency shelters and overnight shelters. The ordinance amendment would allow these uses in business districts as well as mixed-use districts with a conditional use permit. Staff, myself, I've been in communication with existing service providers during the development of the ordinance, and they are in agreement with the provisions in the ordinance. Should council approve the ordinance amendments, the existing providers would come in for a conditional use permit. That conditional use permit would be heard by the Planning Commission. Should council concur with the proposed amendments that are in your packets, a motion to introduce the attached ordinance for approval would be in order.
Would you want to go over some of those for us? Or
Sure, they're essentially listed in your packet. The main thing is that they would be permitted in business districts and mixed-use districts. There would be a 1,000-foot distance requirement between the facilities, so the intent there is not to have too many in one place. The providers were okay with that provision. In addition to that, there are definitions for emergency shelters versus overnight shelters. Overnight shelters is something where people would stay the night and then leave during the day and then come back. That's similar to what is occurring at Community Bible Church in downtown Winona currently. Emergency shelters would allow a stay of up to 6 months for somebody who is experiencing temporary homelessness or needs a temporary place to stay. And a length longer than that could be approved as part of the conditional use permit.
okay, thank you. Any questions for Carlos? Al?
In the proposal, you've listed something called community meeting for these things. Is there a definition somewhere else in the Unified Development Code that defines a community meeting?
We do not have a specific definition for a community meeting, but what we've asked is any adjacent property owners that they send out notification that they are proposing an emergency shelter or an overnight shelter. So for instance, Wesley Church is looking at doing a emergency shelter, and we asked the church to talk to all of their adjacent neighbors about the proposed use.
Thank you.
Are there any, are there currently any facilities that are doing housing or aid of this nature that are not in mixed-use neighborhoods that would be grandfathered in or anything like that? Okay.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you. All right, I will declare this public hearing open on emergency and overnight shelters ordinance amendment. The hearing is now open. Anyone wishing to speak on that matter? Anyone wishing to speak on that matter? State your name and address.
My name is Joseph Mulkey. My address is 415 Wilsey Street, Second Ward. I'd like to respectfully ask the council to reconsider barring homeless shelters and any type of shelter for residential areas. That limits a large section of the city, and obviously a home is an easier place to set up as a shelter than a commercial space. I think currently there's a great shelter, the warming center happening right now, but there's no guarantees that that place or space will always be open to them, or that there will be easily accessible business spot for a homeless shelter to set up. So I'd like to just ask the council to reconsider that. That's what the resolution. And also this work is often done by volunteers, so that I'm concerned about any further hurdles to the having that work done in the city.
Any questions from council? Okay, thank you. One more call. Anyone speaking for or against the emergency overnight shelters ordinance? Final call. All right, hearing none, we'll bring it back to council.
I'll make a motion to introduce the attached ordinance and accept the 3 attachments.
Motion by Michelle. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Paul. Discussion. Eileen.
I do have a question related to what Mr. Mulkey brought up. So this is a question for Carlos. So if there was a facility in or a house in a residential area that wanted to provide emergency shelter, overnight shelter, could they apply to have an exception or a variance, or is this?
Under this provision, there would be no variances that would allow something like that. That being said, if a family wants to bring somebody in overnight or temporarily for a little bit, no problem. But this is meant to be for something where you have a facility and you are serving multiple people or multiple families.
Does this pertain to providing services like food, like during the day?
For overnight shelters in general, the food is provided by other providers or other people within the community. For the emergency shelters, it could be some food provided. We review all that as part of the conditional use permit.
Okay.
Carlos, I have one question. Go ahead, Paul. You go first.
Do we have any do we have any single-family homes or homes that are currently in the city in mixed-use neighborhoods?
Definitely. There are single-family residential type homes in both mixed-use districts as well as business districts.
Mm-hmm.
Pam, you had something?
Yes. So there are residences that shelter homeless people, or?
No, there are homes that are in business districts.
Okay.
They have a traditional home setup. For instance, a lot of the homes along Mankato are zone B1 for community business, but people live there. So that would be an example of an area where this would be permitted, but it would be subject to a conditional use permit.
I would like to know the standing of what may have been, may no longer exist. I know the Catholic Worker House had a couple of residences that were open to people who needed them, needed shelter. Are they no longer functioning, and how would they be affected by this?
The Catholic Worker House would be grandfathered in, essentially.
Okay, I believe that works pretty well in the neighborhood that they're in. I wonder why we're closing the door to other similar situations.
The intent has been to look at business districts and mixed-use districts because of the potential for a number of people and activity around these areas. Those areas see a lot of activity due to the business and other types of uses in those districts. It's what the Planning Commission thought was probably the most suitable area for these types of uses.
Can I ask one question about this?
Go ahead.
Carlos. Carlos, does that apply to the Dan Corcoran house on the same block as the Bethany house?
I've talked to the Catholic Worker House about the Dan Corcoran. The Dan Corcoran is functioning right now under our existing rental ordinance. So they're allowed essentially to continue doing what they're doing under the existing rental ordinance that they are operating with right now.
The Catholic Worker is currently in talks with Grace Place about transferring the property to Grace Place, and with the intent that Grace Place would provide some sort of transitional housing there. Would that be grandfathered in?
As long as it doesn't expand, it would be grandfathered in.
Expand in
The number of people served, the size of the house, the hours of operation. I'd want to make sure that whatever happens at that house, they come in and talk to the planning department, myself, or somebody else in community development, so we can make sure that everything transitions smoothly.
Okay. Expand as the work that was done there prior to the renter?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
I have some. I think you need to contact Grace Place yourself.
Yep.
Let's get proactive about it rather than waiting for them to come talk to us.
Sure.
Thank you.
And Carlos, my question was just, now what if there's a vacant home next door to someone? Can they remodel that into a, into a homeless, I don't like to use the word homeless, but into a home?
They can definitely remodel it into a home. But if it's to be used for emergency shelter or overnight shelter, then it would need the special approval and be in the correct zoning district.
Okay, thank you. All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any more discussion from council?
I would just like to say that I think we're being a little, I appreciate that the Planning Commission has put in a lot of consideration of this issue, but I'm concerned that we're being a little too strictured in our ability to help people, help others. And so I'm going to vote against this.
Okay, Michelle?
I disagree. I actually think we have a lot of business and mixed-use districts throughout the entire community. And it's, people are used to large numbers of people coming and going. And since a homeowner can choose to take in anyone they want, which happened actually quite a bit when the power went out on the west end of town, people turned all of their homes into emergency shelters, and that's still allowable. What we're talking about is a specific place that is servicing a large group that needs to have some oversight from the city. If I want to bring 4 homeless people into my house, Carlos doesn't care, the city doesn't care, nobody cares. But if I'm going to vacate my house and turn it into a homeless shelter, my neighbors have a right to know that. Just like if I were to put a rental in there or add a 3-story garage. So in this case, this is the right place to start. It allows current operation to continue. And then as we move forward, if we find that this is too strict, it allows us to vary it as a council, to look at the ordinance and say, maybe there is a place it could go that we excluded. But I think we have a large number of places where they could operate already without changing some of the tone of neighborhoods in ways that some of the neighbors may be uncomfortable with.
Emily?
I kind of agree with both of you. I'm a little bit concerned about limiting where these facilities can go, because I do think that it eliminates a lot of neighborhoods, and I think part of helping folks who are in need of emergency shelter is giving them a sense of normalcy, which doesn't always mean a business area. But I also am glad that we are defining what these things are so we can make sure that they're safe. So I will be in favor, but I hope that we can revisit it if it's not functioning the way that it should.
Anyone else?
Oh, I just have
Pam?
a comment. If there are people who are willing to work to create such a place and they can find a place, a house in a residential neighborhood, can they come to council, can they come to the planning department and talk about this so we know that people are looking and that we might reconsider our decision here tonight? How will we know?
I can definitely come back to council if there's any desire to do these types of uses in residential districts. That's definitely an option.
Thanks.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, all those in favor of the motion for emergency and overnight shelter ordinance amendments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
Aye.
One opposed. Okay, public hearing number 3, the Unified Development Code text amendments. And Carlos, we'll turn it back over to you to start us off.
All right, for this agenda item, council, Unified Development Code text amendments, again, staff requests council to consider this as part of a public hearing. These text amendments are what council reviewed at its August 19th council meeting. On August 26th, the planning commission voted unanimously to approve the amendments that are included in your packets. A summary of the amendments is provided actually in attachment number 2. The Planning Commission began reviewing the amendments following adoption of the Unified Development Code, the city's updated zoning ordinance in 2017. It was expected that after adoption of the UDC, there would be necessary adjustments to the document, which was the city's first comprehensive rewrite of the zoning code in over 50 years. In consideration of the item, there's a number of options available to council. You could approve the amendments, modify the amendments, deny the amendments, or table the item if there's additional questions.
Now do this all, I think you just explained it. Are we voting this as blanket coverage, or we can pull one out or two out or whatever it may be?
Sure, you can do whatever you'd like to do when it comes to approving all of them at once or pulling one out if you'd like. That's definitely an option.
Okay, and can we vote on that item then separately?
You could vote on that item separately as well.
Okay. All right, thank you. All right, I will declare this public hearing open. It's on the Unified Development Code text amendments. The hearing is now open. Anyone wishing to speak? Anyone wishing to speak? Final call, anyone wishing to speak?
Guess not.
He might. Getting clarification. I don't, yeah.
You care to speak?
I need some clarification, I'm
Okay,
sorry.
okay.
Josh Stussy, Mr. Interim Mayor?
Acting.
And Acting Mayor and members of the City Council. My name is Josh Stussy, 470 East 2nd Street. I own a company, Rojo Properties. We cater to single-family homes from the west side all the way to the east side. What I'm here in support of is the parking amendment to the code for, right now as it stands, there's 2 off-street parkings for every single-family home. And forgive me if I'm wrong, but I think the amendment or the change to the code is to become 1 single stall with 2 covered parking spots for bicycles. We have roughly 19 homes in Winona, in the city of Winona, and 2 instances come to mind. 166 High Forest, when we purchased the home, we tore down the garage, specifically so we could make a parking pad. So a perfectly good garage that was there, we tore it down, put a parking pad up, so it would meet the requirements to get a city permit. At that cost to us was about $4,000. Another property we have is 53 Vine Street in Winona, and that home still has a 1-car garage and a driveway. But to get a permit, we had to take out the curb and re-curb it, take out the apron from the north side, and we moved the parking to the south side of the house. having to recurve that area, put a new apron in, put new concrete blocks in for the sidewalk and make the curb, and make the parking spot, which reduced the lawn about 50%. We're not in the college rental market, we're in single-family home market. And I think if we look at the comprehensive housing study that was put out maybe 2 years ago, something along those lines, there's really a market for these people and for people in our community that need single-family homes. In addition to that, I think this amendment or adjustment to the code falls in line with the city's view, with the Park and Rec's view for Winona becoming a more bike-friendly city. So I'm here to offer my support for that. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to take them or yield my time.
Questions? Hearing none, okay.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Final call. This is the last speaker now.
Ted Hazelton, 1073 West 5th Street. My concern again is echoed as the parking situation. It seems odd that we struggle for parking, especially in the Winona State area, and we're asking property owners that rent out provide 2 parking stalls per single family dwelling. And now the suggestion is to reduce it to 1 and then make a covered parking area for bicycles. Well, why would we want to do that? Well, most people park bicycles in their garage or in their basement and they don't ride them in the winter. I would suggest that council should vote on that separately and either table it or vote against it, because it takes valuable parking spaces in the community, especially for alternate parking when that happens. And it seems counterproductive to require this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ted. Okay, public hearing is now closed, and we'll bring it back to the council.
I'd make a motion to approve the amendments and introduce the ordinance for adoption, accepting all 3 attachments, the text amendment ordinance, the text amendment summary, and the planning commission minutes.
Motion made by Michelle, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Al. Discussion. Eileen?
I'm just, I was looking through this and looking for some clarification on the, that parking piece of it. So is this a question for Luke? One of you. Is there, so a residence has to have at least 1 spot and then they can start substituting the bike spaces, is that correct?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. The substitution rate is actually allowed for up to 4 automobile spaces, and that would allow a single-family home that is not able to supply any automobile space to supply only bicycle parking, should they so choose. The idea being to offer the flexibility to reflect the actual market demand. Again, dating back to our original studies, which we gave to the City Council in August, we found that 66% of rental households in the city of Winona have 1 car or less. So we don't anticipate this to actually help anything except to reformalize the actual movement patterns of the city of Winona.
Okay. Thanks.
Paul?
So thinking about that single-family residence with the possibility of going from 2 to 1 and adding covered bicycle parking. How will what's the plan to enforce this? So, let's say property owner rents to 3 college students. They've signed up for 1 + 2, that's whatever you want to call it. And now all of a sudden, the college students, each one of the 3 show up with a car. What is our recourse and how do we enforce this?
Dating to the original inspection of the property, all properties have to go through a rental inspection process in which our inspector will confirm that they are meeting our parking requirements. In this case, whether through the bicycle substitution rate with the covered bicycle parking or through automobile spaces or a mixture of the two. If 3 people do happen to show up and they all bring cars and they don't have parking for them, we do anticipate that they will find a space someplace else for their vehicle. We do know that the actual impact per rental size, the number of rentals in a specific parcel do not actually correlate to the requirements or the need for multiple vehicles or the impact upon publicly available spaces. We also know that parking specifically for college rentals is a highly elastic demand. Those who are unable to find spaces within an appropriate walking distance will likely choose to leave their vehicle behind for the next semester or at a later date.
And then how often are these units inspected?
Inspections occur every 5 years. Inspections occur on an as-needed basis per unit or property.
Yeah, so that was one concern that I have. So, I mean, the student is here for 4 years. So let's hypothetically say, for the sake of argument, that this college rental, 3 units or 3 students, they get inspected, they rent to the 3 students, and now they're not inspected for 5 years. Each of these 3 students can have a vehicle for the entire length of their college career, and the property would not be inspected, and there wouldn't be any enforcement of the parking.
While that hypothetical is possible, again, the data does indicate that rental households, which is one actual rentable unit, do only have 1 vehicle or less in 66% of cases. So we don't actually see that hypothetical play out at an average basis here in the city of Winona. Should that occur, we would expect that, again, the market demand is fairly elastic. If they do have difficulties, they can either park on the street or choose not to bring a vehicle. Winona is blessed with many different transportation options into the city. Further, again, this is only related to parking minimums as mandated by the city of Winona. We do find that renters and landlords like Mr. Stussy actually provide an appropriate amount of parking or more than adequate parking, not just because of the 2 per unit, 2 automobile spaces per unit limit, but also because parking is a commodity that is desirable. For example, the additional parking spaces that are implemented in the main square development that are not mandated by city code.
Eileen? I have a question that's not about the parking piece of it. One of the changes that is in here is the change from the language directly adjacent to adjoining, as far as building height and changes to buildings close to other buildings. Can you, what's the difference?
Essentially, it's just a clarification to say that instead of directly adjacent, it means the parcels have to be right next to each other.
Okay.
Yep.
So this one, okay, gotcha. Thank you.
A question?
Pam?
Yes. I just would like some clarification on the silica sand. There's at least on my printout, which section, it's on page 10, Carlos. It says, transportation facilities used to ship silica sand except for dredged material shall also comply with specific conditions set forth under, and then it's error.
That is not proposed to be included in the ordinance. That's just a simple error from Microsoft Word. Essentially what that's referencing is our specific standards for silica sand. It references a different section of code.
Okay.
I have one more
Eileen?
question. Thank you. I have another question, Carlos, on the sidewalks or shared use paths. I saw see that defined, so is it just, is there no specificity on what the shared use path has to be made of?
We don't have material requirements in the UDC for shared use paths. In a similar manner, we don't have material requirements for sidewalks in the UDC.
Okay.
Those things are in another section of city code.
But, so then there are requirements somewhere that say?
Chapter 25.
Okay, great, thank you. Yes.
I would like to applaud the landlord for having ample parking and taking care of your properties. The question I have is, okay, I rent, I come with my car, and I got 2 bikes on the back. Maybe I got 3 bikes on the back,
Whoa.
you know?
Doing a lot of riding.
You know, maybe I have friends come and visit me, and I got the bikes for them.
It's beautiful.
To clarify, are you asking if the person supplying the housing would have adequate bike parking for all of the bikes on the back of that vehicle?
I guess probably.
I'll give you spots for 6.
Okay.
How are you supposed to answer that?
Just like any home, I imagine that whoever is renting will find a space for those bicycles. Again, we are mandating the bare minimum with this change in proposal, in which they will have to conform with with dimension standards, which would be 6 feet by 2 feet, and have a 5-foot access aisle for the actual minimum that they are implementing. Anything over and above, if they happen to find a good closet or something similar, I'm certain that they can store them there.
Which I hate.
And this is for all new rental properties, correct?
This would be for all residential uses, should
Okay.
a landlord choose to implement it.
Okay, Michelle?
I just want to say, like, I own rental property where we do deal with a lot of college students, and you have houses that are certified for 5 that either don't have to have parking or have 1 space. And this is not going to affect them at all, because they are under no obligation to provide parking as they are grandfathered in, and there would be no reason for them to do this unless their tenants ask them to. So I think a lot of people are afraid that somehow the density is going to increase in the already dense locations, but the truth is those people already have the right to rent without parking spaces. So what this will really do is, as new developments come online, it'll give single-family homes, developments, subdivisions, another option instead of just concrete space for parking. That's really what it's meant to do. And where our houses are on Center and Lafayette and right on campus, those people come with 1 or 4 cars, and the city doesn't inspect that. If there are 2 spots required and there are 4 renters and they bring 5 cars, that is not an inspectable item. What is inspectable is, did we build it to code? Is the place safe? Did we install windows without pulling a permit? Is the roof leaking? The stuff they're looking at is safety oriented, and then of course this part would be included if it passes, because we will be required to pull a permit to build the structure and get approval for the parking. But none of the main part of the city is going to start coming in to pull these permits to all of a sudden not have a parking space, because you can't have more than 3 tenants in a building anymore. So even if they had space to add more rooms, they wouldn't be able to add more tenants. They're limited. We've locked that down. And we have the 30% rule that means those blocks are already saturated. So I think if we're going towards a bike-friendly community, this is a good option. And I found that as my tenants are coming, they are very careful to either rent where they have car space if they have cars, or if they're downtown, they bring bikes. And they're making that decision all on their own, where before we had tenants that would come with 5 cars and 5 bikes and mopeds, and that generation is gone. So I think it's a great option. I think it will encourage development, and it covers some of my concerns for downtown development, where you have blank spaces where buildings have burned down and you're looking for future development options, and parking is a big issue. So I'm really hoping that this will go through as promised, and I guess if we find that it is not working as we had hoped, we can always revisit it. But I think it's going to be a positive thing for the community from a car perspective.
Paul?
I just want to acknowledge the planning staff and the planning commission for recognizing the importance of bicycling as a transportation alternative, and the fact that we're having this discussion here with buildings and residents shows the importance of having infrastructure for bicycles within the community.
Anyone else? Pam?
Yes, this is a different topic, actually. I'm on page 13. We're talking about owner-occupied homes. And it's specifying that only relatives of the owner of record shall not require a rental housing license. Spouse, son or daughter, mother, father, sister, brother, dependents of 1 to 4, of numbers 1 to 4. And then we're saying that no rent should be exchanged between these people and the owner of record. I guess my question might be more philosophical than anything, but why is the city concerned with this? I mean, if a family of adults is living together in a nice big house, why is the city concerned about whether one or more of them are contributing to the mortgage? I just don't get it.
What this is intended to do is to address a situation where somebody buys a house and then their child lives in it while they come to Winona State, for instance. Or if you own a property and your brother, your sister, their family need a place to stay, they can stay there. The idea is what we don't want people to be doing is to be renting their homes and finding a loophole around the 30% rule. So what this is meant to do is to help shore up a potential loophole to the 30% rule.
So like, I have a house, and I bought it, and I let my family move in, and they're renting it from me and paying me, and even though they're my family, I'm still renting it to them, but I'm doing it so that I don't have to comply with the city regulations on the 30% rule. Or maybe I have 5 brothers and sisters, which I do, and they're all going to college here, and I say, oh, I own this house, you guys can rent it from me. There are people that do that. They rent their houses out, or sometimes they rent in there and there's 3 of them that are related and they have 1 unrelated that they bring in. And so I think that's what they're rubbing up against, is they had to define what that is and what the rules are because people were violating that rental 30% rule break.
Okay, I understand that some people might do that. This just seems like it's really coming down hard on that few people that might do that. I'll leave it to you that you have studied that. That's all.
Okay, anyone else? All right, we have a motion, we have a second. So all those in favor of the Unified Development Code text amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Carried. All right, at this time, we will move on to item 5.1, and we'll be going through 5.1 to 5.4.
Mayor and Council, so 5.1 is our annual review for our city health insurance for the next year, for 2020. And as you know, we had the pre-council, half-hour pre-council prior to this meeting to go through the details and kind of a booklet. We have with us this evening a representative from the firm of Mercer to go over just a kind of high-level review of what would be included in the 2020 health insurance plan. I'd like to introduce Joe Hart.
Acting Mayor and Council, good night, or good evening. Thanks for having me. Tonight in the pre-council session, we reviewed the 2020 Health Insurance Committee recommendations. The Health Insurance Committee met this year in May and August and did a great job going through the various difficult issues related to health insurance for the city employees. After deliberation, and as we discussed in our meeting, we are recommending that a 9.5% increase to the health insurance rates for the current city plans, the 3 plans that we currently have, remaining with Blue Cross Blue Shield of Minnesota as our administrator, increasing our stop loss level from $110,000 to $115,000, and introducing the Minnesota State mandate, which will require the coverage of diabetic pharmaceuticals such as insulin at 100% coverage with no copay, no deductible. So after some deliberation and discussion amongst the insurance committee, that is what they've brought forward to you, and we asked for your approval. Any questions?
Questions for Joe? Anyone?
I'd make a motion to approve the City Health Insurance Committee's recommendations for 2020.
I second that.
Motion made by
Michelle.
thank you. I was going to say Marlene. Motion made by Michelle, seconded by Pam. I heard her first, so questions.
This is just completely irrelevant, but I'm going to just embarrass myself. For years, I thought your name was Joe Mercer. It just hit me right now that that's the company you work for.
Yeah, thank you.
In my mind, those two things go together.
I'd be a rich man at this point if I was Joe Mercer. I might not even be here.
I do look forward to coming every year. This is one of those meetings I really thoroughly enjoy, but I will now try to remember your correct name, not
Right on.
Mercer.
Perfect, thank you very much.
Okay, all in favor to approve the city's health insurance committee's recommendation for 2020, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, carried. Item 5, oh, that's your job.
Item 5.2 is the health insurance program funding.
Mayor and Council, you have before you a resolution that outlines the recommendation from staff to provide $140,500 more in city contribution, and we explained this also in the pre-council meeting. This is in the budget already.
Make a motion to accept this resolution.
Second.
Motion made by Michelle, seconded by Eileen. Discussion? Okay, all in favor to approve the health insurance program funding, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, carried.
Item 5.3 is the 2020 ancillary benefits.
Make a motion to approve the city's life insurance, long-term disability, short-term disability, employee assistance program, flexible spending, and health reimbursement account administration.
Second.
Motion made by Michelle, second by Eileen. I will be repeating all that when I call the question. Any questions? Al, Paul, anyone on anything? Okay. All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, carried.
Item 5.4 is the 2020 dental insurance coverage and rates.
Make a motion to approve the city's dental insurance.
Second.
Motion made by Michelle, seconded by Eileen. Questions?
As you'll notice, there is a 0% increase for this rate.
Very good, very good. All right, all in favor signify by saying aye of the dental insurance.
Aye.
Those opposed, carried.
Now we'll go back to the request.
Thank you, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
Joe Harton.
Yes, not Joe Mercer.
Joe
I've got
Mercer.
this now.
The petitions, requests, and communications, item 3.1, is the reappointment to the Housing and Redevelopment Authority of Matt Hazelton.
Move to approve that request.
Moved by Michelle, seconded by Al. Questions? I just want to say it's good to have Matt back. He's a good board member with us out there, so. Okay, all in favor of the appointment to the Housing and Redevelopment Authority signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, carried.
Item 5.2, reappointment to the Cable TV Commission of Dave Polk.
Move to approve that request.
Second.
Moved by Michelle, seconded by Eileen. Discussion? All in favor of the appointment?
Aye.
Those opposed? Carried.
Item 3.3, reappointment to the Citizens Environmental Quality Committee of Julie Fassbender.
Move to approve. I'll second.
Moved by Paul, seconded by Michelle. Questions? All in favor of the reappointment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Carried.
Item 3.4 is an application for an on-sale wine and 3-2 malt liquor license for Maya Japanese Bistro.
A motion to approve the liquor license.
Second.
Motion made by Michelle, seconded by Eileen. Questions?
Just very excited.
Okay, good, good. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Carried.
Item 3.5 is a license agreement for the Sanborn Canoe Company event to be held Saturday, September 21st.
Make a motion to approve the license agreement. Second that.
Moved by Michelle, seconded by Pam. Discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, carried.
Item 3.6 is a request for a temporary wine and beer license for the Friends of the Boundary Waters Wilderness for the Sanborn Company event.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Michelle, seconded by Paul. Discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, carried.
Item 3.7 is a temporary wine and malt liquor license for Habitat for Humanity for 3 events at St. Cecilia Theater on September 20th, October 26th, and February 29th.
Make a motion to approve the license.
Second.
That.
Approved by Michelle, motion by Michelle, seconded by Pam. Discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Carried.
Item 3.8 is a temporary wine and malt liquor license for the Great River Shakespeare Fest for 3 events to be held at St. Cecilia Theater on October 18th, December 7th, and January 25th.
Move to approve the license.
I'd second that.
Moved by Michelle, seconded by Pam. Questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Carried.
Item 3.9 is a temporary wine and malt liquor license for the Frozen River Film Fest for 1 event on November 16th.
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved by Michelle, seconded by Eileen. Questions? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Carried.
And item 3.10 is a request by Peter's Beer Garden LLC, and we're looking for council approval prior to the plan review.
I'd make a motion to approve this request.
I'd second this.
A motion made by Michelle, seconded by Pam. Anybody want to discuss anything on this, or?
And Mr. Espinosa is here if you have questions.
Okay. Why don't you tell us, Carlos, what's going on?
Evening, Council. I'm here my first time as a private resident of the city of Winona. Also the owner of Peter's Beer Garden LLC. It's a startup business, and tonight I'm here to request operation of a seasonal temporary food stand for this business at 54 East 3rd Street. That's where the sandlots are in downtown currently. What I'm proposing to do is put a beer garden in that place. It'd be what the Department of Health calls a seasonal temporary food stand. It's something that would only be open from June to late October, Fridays and Saturdays through mid-August, and then add in Thursdays from mid-August through the end of October. Prior to reviewing the plans that I have for the site, the Department of Health has requested council's approval to operate more than 21 days a year, so that's what I'm here for tonight.
What do you have planned for going over the sand, cement, or?
Sure, it'll be a combination of cement, artificial turf, and then graveled areas. It'll basically be some of the nice artificial turf grass that is used on athletic fields. And that'll be in the seating area and also in a rear lawn area for yard games.
Okay. Paul?
I'm just wondering how you got that tree to grow so fast in the picture.
The picture that's part of your council packets is from a beer garden in Hayes Valley neighborhood of San Francisco. That's what the concept for this beer garden is based off of, as well as inspiration from multiple other beer gardens that are similar throughout the country.
Al?
I think this is an exciting, something new that we've never had before, and I didn't know that you were the person behind it, but I'm sure it's going to meet all of the ordinances that we have. But the questions I have, you're asking for 64 days a year. Is there any magic number to 64, or is that a combination of what you think is going to be the weather appropriate for a beer garden?
Sure. That simply reflects the operating time frame from mid-May to mid-August, Friday and Saturday, add in a Thursday until the end of October, plus 10 days for special events, that type of thing.
Now, I think I've read the material that says it's kind of a family affair.
Exactly.
How is that all going to be? I mean, whenever we have outdoor events like the levee or steamboat days, the beverage garden there's kind of a policing of underage as opposed to appropriate age consumers of the beverage?
Yes, we'll be checking IDs. The idea is something similar to a brewery, like Island City, where you see people in there, but they may not hesitate to bring their kids in
Yeah.
for a family event.
That's what I thought. I knew you had it all lined up. Not surprising.
Anyone else? You could probably get some sod, probably from Minnesota fans yesterday. They probably brought back from Green Bay, so probably get it cheap.
No comment.
Okay. All right, manager.
Just checking on the zoning.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, we have a motion and a second for approval of a request by Peter's Beer Garden LLC. All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Carried. Good luck.
Item 3.11 is the Tobacco 21 support request, and distributed tonight was a draft of the letter that they are requesting for approval.
Okay, are you Helen?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hello everybody, my name's Helen Bagshaw. Thank you for seeing us. I know you've got kind of a time limit here, and I could keep you here for an hour talking about Tobacco 21 and the importance of what this is going to do for our youth. So I really want to plead with you that increasing the sale age for tobacco to 21 will reduce smoking and save lives. We know that tobacco use remains the leading cause of preventable death in the US. It's all over your newspapers. We've seen vaping, e-cigarettes. We've seen our 12, 14-year-olds who weren't interested in tobacco and smoking, and now the Surgeon General calls it an epidemic. This isn't a new thing. The Tobacco 21. I think I told you that there was maybe 41 cities. Even in the last week, another city in Minnesota, Mounds, has got for the T21. So we have 43 cities in Minnesota that have passed this Tobacco 21. This is, where we want to have healthy, young people. We've got lots of supporters. We've got community leaders. This has to pass, but I need people like you to stand up and to say this is important. This is what we have to do for our youth. Other counties and cities are doing this, so we know that we have to be there. We don't want to leave it behind. I've got Polly and Denver. I don't know if you want to say anything. So I know you're really short of time, so...
No. Good evening, Council. Thank you for listening to us. I'm Pauline Krause, and my address is 117 Candlewood Drive. So I have worked in healthcare for 40-plus years. I'm not going to say exactly how many because I'll give away my age, but I just want to drive home a couple points. 95% of adult smokers started before the age of 21. 95%, that's a lot. Many of our smokers and vapors who are in middle school and junior high get their products from people who are not 21 years old. So if we can move that age to 21 when the brain has matured and we make more rational decisions at age 21, we hope to decrease that people will want to use those tobacco products. I feel we have a responsibility to the youth in this community to change this tobacco purchase age up to 21. I guess just to make it personal, think about this. If you could keep a pack of cigarettes away from your 18-year-old son or daughter or your 18-year-old granddaughter or grandson, wouldn't it be worth it? Wouldn't it be? And smoking affects every organ in our body. People think it just affects our lungs. It affects our eyes. It contributes to cataracts. It contributes to heart disease. She mentioned financial costs. At Winona Health, we have to do a tobacco assessment on every patient that we see. So, and then we have to report that. That is a mandated reporting issue. We have to report it to the insurer, and we have to report it to all the federal and state payers. So that includes everybody in this room. So all our insurance rates depend on that. So thank you for having us, and we're just really asking for your support. And we, like Helen said, is just really important to the health of our community.
Thank you.
Oh, yes, I should have introduced Denver. He is our a PA at Winona Health. He is our tobacco specialist. So if you have any questions, please. And I'm going to just pass out a few things that were not included in your packet.
I don't have any new information. You heard the stats, but I see patients on a daily basis that are trying to get off of nicotine, and no one's ever told me they have to get started. So it's a really addictive disease, more addictive than probably any other chemical, including alcohol, meth, whatever else you want to stack up against it. So the longer we can delay exposure, the better. Happy to answer any questions if you want.
Helen, I think I saw you give a presentation on that little backpack with all the nasty goodies in it that look like pens and mint containers that trick teachers and parents, and because there's not really a smell associated with vaping, they do it in class or in the hallways. So I just want to clarify, this includes vaping. You are asking the county and the state and everyone to 21 and older vaping. Because, I mean, I think I emailed you, I mean, our state is looking at recreational marijuana use, which is smoked, and we live in a border state, which means kids can easily access tobacco, but maybe this would keep the majority of students from experimenting or experiencing that cigarette the first time or vaping. Is that what we're hoping?
Yep.
Is that we get enough, we catch enough of them?
Yeah, so tobacco 21 would be all tobacco products. And that's the thing with our youth. You know, we all probably would have been smoking in this room, 20, 30 years ago. And now we know that all the harm that cigarette smoking does. But vaping and e-cigarettes and Juuls, they're not regulated by the FDA. We don't know. We don't have that knowledge. So we have to protect our youth. And this is, I don't know many 12 and 14-year-olds that hang out with 21-year-olds, but I know a lot of 12 and 14-year-olds that hang out with 18-year-olds. So, we can do the education like we did with smoking, but it wasn't until we got those facts and we know all those things that we know now when the norms started to change. So this is just a step. This is, and I think we're protecting those young brains.
I just make one comment about the vaping and tobacco kind of connection. So we still don't know a lot about vaping, long-term effects, and things like that. So some people say, well, maybe it's a safe alternative. But a big concern with that is if there's studies that have shown if you've ever vaped, if you've ever vaped, you're 3.5 times more likely to try tobacco. So they're closely connected, even if vaping is safe, which probably not. If it's a pathway toward smoking, it's not worth it. So that's why I think it's important that be included in that same age recommendation.
All right, thank you, folks.
I'd make a motion to support the request of Tobacco 21.
I'd second that.
Motion made by Michelle, seconded by Pam, and this is the letter here that we are supporting, correct? Okay. I remember years ago, and they used to roll their own Bull Durham. Get the paper out, remember, Paul?
You're looking at me.
Okay.
So I do have a comment.
Sure, go ahead.
I'm going to support this, but I have friends and siblings who served in the military. I am on this somewhat of a libertarian, admittedly, and as a former smoker of 20 years, and I haven't for more than 25. So I know the harmful effects, but I do believe that if we're sending our children at 18, we call them adults, to fight our wars, they certainly should have the right to choose to smoke. I've said my piece.
Okay.
I mean, it butts up against my personal liberty thing too, because 18-year-olds can buy guns, they're asked to serve in the war. I mean, they're adults for every other purpose except for drinking, but I don't know that this would actually fly through with the state or county, but it's like a statement. But I'm with you, Paul, because I'm a very strong believer in that person. In fact, when they took cigarette smoking out of the bars and restaurants, although I personally benefited because I hated it, I thought, oh my gosh, this isn't right. We're telling people how to live. But 18 is young. Well, you know, because you smoked for 20 years. You know how it is. My mom did it and she stopped for us kids, or I think we would have been smokers, because I think that's how it is. You see your mom doing it, you do it, becomes habit. Anyway, it was really hard for me to decide to support this like you. Not because I think it's right for them to smoke, but oof.
Just that, since we were talking about health insurance tonight, and I think anything that will help with public health and, with what folks are paying into insurance is good, and it's a public health issue. But yeah, I feel the same way about if that 18 and 21 is tricky, but I don't feel very conflicted about this.
Okay, I myself, I think it's a good move, so. All right. Call the question on the Tobacco 21 support request. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, carried.
Item 3.12 is the Ewing Street closure request for Evie's Corner for Saturday, September 28th.
Make a motion to approve the request.
Second.
Moved by Michelle, seconded by Eileen. Discussion, be a good benefit. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, carried. Paperbacks,
Item 3.13, Paperbacks and Pieces street closure for Saturday, October 12th.
Move to approve that request.
Second.
moved to approve by Michelle, seconded by Paul. Okay, questions? All in favor of the request signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, carried.
3.14 is a request by the Winona ORC for the Starlight Stroll on November 1st.
Move to approve that request.
Second.
Moved by Michelle, seconded by Paul. Questions? And this is a very nice Starlight Stroll. That's exactly what it is, and it's a good event. All in favor supporting the Winona ORC Starlight Stroll?
Aye.
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 Excuse me.
Those opposed? Carried.
Item 3.15 is a four-way stop sign at 2nd and Walnut Street intersection.
I'd make a motion to deny the request. I would second that.
Motion by Michelle to deny the request, seconded by Pam. Discussion, Paul?
Yeah, so I have seen people try to cross that intersection many times and really struggle with the traffic. So I'm wondering if there's a way we can put a pedestrian signal so traffic can see or know that there are pedestrians trying to cross there. We are going to have more pedestrians using that intersection when 102 Walnut opens its doors. And so I just would like to be a little more conscious of that.
Clarification, do you mean a blinky blinky, or, I'm sorry, I can't remember what they're called?
I
Or like the
understand
standard one,
entirely
or the
what you mean.
like the one that stands there, so that when there's traffic?
A blinky blinky.
I can never remember. what it's-
Mostly because I also feel like the yellow pedestrian crossing signs just don't cut it.
They start
Right,
to-
it's
yeah,
just
they
like,
start to-
I had the yellow sign and just keep driving. So, I think was a reasonable request by the property owner there, and thought out. I understand the reasoning that planning or staff decided to recommend denying this based on traffic counts. I do believe that as things change with Walnut Street, with the development, Bay State, and we use Fremling Drive more often with activities and events at Levy. Walnut Street, that intersection is actually going to be a busier one to be watching out for.
Eileen?
I'm in favor of denying the request, but I think that we'll probably have to look at it again once the businesses are in 102 Walnut, but my husband works at Affinity, so I'm often crossing that street because I like him. And
That's great.
And I would say I have an easier time often getting across that street than I do some of the four-ways because people are being extra careful instead of just rolling through the stop signs. So I don't know right now. There's not, I'm in favor of denying this.
I do worry too, because I've sat in Port 507 in that location where I didn't want the other stop sign, and I've watched truck and car just blow right through that stop sign. I was there with you when we watched 7 cars go by in an hour, and they just blew through that stop sign because it's in an odd location, because there's never cross traffic.
Johnson and Second.
Yes, and I know that there was argument to put it in, but I mean, it's actually less safe with it for the reason you're talking about, is people either don't see it or and then it backs up, you get the couple trucks on there and you're backing up past that intersection for the next stop sign, and it just causes problems. And I'm willing to look at when more people move into that area and it's more used, but I think your worry is more pedestrian related, which would be my greater worry than the cars being able to get through the intersections.
Yep.
So, yes, still for denial, and I still hate that stop sign at Johnson. It's okay.
Anyone else? All right, there is a motion on the table to deny the request for four-way stop at Second and Walnut Street.
Mayor, since I made the request, am I able to speak or not?
Well, not really, but I'll give you a minute.
Okay, well, the reason I asked that is because although I wasn't aware that staff had denied it, we never got any feedback or discussion from staff on this issue after our request. And the concern is not even so much the fact of a vastly expanded amount of people, we hope, coming at that corner from the development of those 4 buildings in that corner. But I want you to remember that this is the entrance to Levy Park. So you have a lot of people at different times of the day. I watch that intersection because it's my neighborhood all the time. And what you're seeing is a lot of people on bicycles, pushing wheelchairs. It's a very common, strollers. So what you have is a lot of traffic at that point. You're coming down into Levy Park. You've got a lot of semi-traffic on 2nd Street. Second Street is a semi-truck route at this point. And whether Bay State changed and trucks are going to be less, there's so much traffic going between RTP and Lawrence Transport. It's a very dynamic intersection. And I would suggest that I hope that nothing happens. I personally have seen a number of very close calls. People don't stop at intersections when they're supposed to for a crosswalk. This is a big issue. That's an enforcement issue, I realize, but the only way everything gets done is if somebody gets hit. So that's a big issue, and I think we'll be back here. I would ask, if you're going to deny this, that you ask the street department to at least mark the crosswalk so it's very clear that there are crosswalks there, because we are not, it's a problem area, and it's going to become a bigger problem area. All of the parking from that neighborhood, which the city is after, is down in Levy Park, down in the riverfront parking lot, the Levy Park parking lot. So all the parking for a lot of this area is pushed into Levy Park. So that means everybody's crossing that area. So anyway, it will come back to you. And I hope it isn't in a bad way. So be aware of that. And I would ask you to, at least if you're going to deny it, direct city staff before the fall season to really paint and mark that crosswalk more significantly, if you would.
Thank you. We can do that?
Sure.
Okay. All right, there's a motion on the table, and recalling the question, all in favor of denying the stop sign signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
Aye.
One opposed.
And now we are on new business, item 5.5. It's the infrastructure grant for business expansion.
I make a motion to approve the resolution.
I second that.
Motion made by Michelle, seconded by Pam. Al, I believe this is something you and I worked on with the port last week, Thursday.
Right, and the port was very complimentary to Alliant Castings and their expansion efforts, which not only will bring new buildings, new facilities, but also approximately 10 to 15 new jobs to the community. This is a way to support local industry and help it grow and keep our community humming.
Good project, so. Anyone else? Okay, all in favor of the infrastructure grant? Signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Carried.
Item 5.6 is the bike striping pilot project, and you received 2 letters of support, one from Live Well Winona and the second from the Winona State Student Senate.
Make a motion to accept the pilot project along with the 5 attachments.
Second.
Motion by Michelle, seconded by Paul. Discussion? Al?
Yeah, I'd like to offer an amendment to this motion to not remove the parking on the west side of Huff Street. And if there's a second, we can talk about that. And otherwise, everything else, you know, to me, this motion makes sense, but not that part.
Are you going to second his amendment?
I have a question about it first.
Oh, we got it. Oh, go ahead. A question about his amendment?
Yes.
Oh.
Have to second it first.
Yeah,
So-
we have to
So
we
I'll
have to
second it
Okay.
Thank you for purposes of discussion.
Yeah.
Yes.
Motion made by Al and seconded by Eileen, so.
So I got some emails and calls about that specific piece of it, removing the parking on Huff Street. And I just wanted to ask for refresher sake, are we talking about all of the parking on Huff Street or specific blocks?
Thank you, Acting Mayor and Council. The parking removal would be from Ninth Street south to the tracks where the road width, curb to curb, is only 36 feet. So the pavement width is not adequate in order to facilitate an appropriate automobile parking situation. As you'll probably notice from having driven on Huff Street, we do have automobiles that do abut and go into the travel lane due to the limited size of the parking there. Additionally, the parking spaces there are 30-minute and 10-minute, as well as a vestige of a former bus stop. In consultation with the city engineer, we do believe that we can supply adequate demand on side streets, and we would bring forward a separate a separate ordinance amendment for any changes to parking, which would be coming forward. So this does not actually remove parking on Huff Street. You would be authorizing us to actually implement the pilot project.
Okay, that was my second question.
Question, this is a pilot project, but as we implement the pilot project, the parking there will not be affected? Is that what we just heard?
According to Councilmember Thurley's amendment.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, I've heard, or if I might, I've heard from, and talked to some of the businesses along there, the Monkey Junction specifically, and then the group of businesses, Zaza's and Warp Zone in that area, that have real concerns about losing parking in that area. You know, it's really not their fault, because Huff Street, as you know, historically was about to be expanded in the 1970s. And the community came up and said, no, we don't want you to expand that because we want to save the trees along Huff Street. And so the council didn't expand it to the full extent they originally wanted to expand it. So now we have a problem where it's not as wide as it should be to allow all of this to happen. And I'm not one to think that by moving the parking from the Huff Street area to around to the side, we're going to make their businesses more successful. I think it'll be less successful because people won't be able to park there as they drive by. They won't be able to park in front. And that's critical for a business like that. And some instances where people would pursue to or perceive to go to one business and realize that, oh, well, we can't park here, so we can just go down the block because there's another similar business and put, you know, use that business. So I think there's a real fear of loss of business if this goes through by removing parking on the west side of Huff Street. And I don't have any answers for what I would suggest, quite frankly. But, you know, I do know that we have good staff people, and maybe there's another route besides Huff Street that could be used for bicycle traffic. And also, you know, another comment is the existing parking that's there perhaps needs to have better enforcement for the time frame that's allowing people to park there all day, which is not allowing for enough turn for business. So that's the purpose of the amendment, and I'd really like to see it be successful. I'd like to see the bike project, the striping project, to be successful as well, but I don't want to do it at the cost of losing business for the existing businesses that are there and serve the community by their presence.
Michelle?
So I don't care if the bike path goes on Huff. My issue is with parking lots that have a car in summer in the driving lane. And I have for years advocated that those parking spots should not be there. And they are not 30 and 10-minute turnover. And they are not moving from in front of Zaza's, because I drive that route frequently and you can never park there. Because if you're not enforcing it, if the city's not enforcing it, why would you ever move your car? Why would you? There's no reason to. But more importantly, and apart from that, apart from the bike lane, my whole goal was to make that route safer. I've actually seen students hit by cars because you have people trying to get out in a driving lane. Then you add the snow and ice and the cars further into the driving lane. It's not a place where there should ever have been parking, ever. And I just put the bike path on a different road. That's fine with me. I don't really care where it is. I want the bike lane, but it doesn't have to be Huff. But the parking on that specific 2-block interval is just not safe. Now, I could make a case for down by Zaza's, where it gets a little bit wider, but by Mugby, there is no reason that there is parking right there. It is absolutely the most unsafe situation I've ever seen. And again, that's in summer. That's not, they don't even have an appropriate bike park lane in summer. So I don't understand how we would allow students to get out in a traffic route that is, it's not like Wabasha Street where there's stop signs every block and people are moving slower. This is a high traffic, high movement for pedestrian, bike, and car, and we're putting students into the lane of traffic. It's just, to me, it's just the most unsafe situation. So if we move the bike lane, I'm okay with that, but I'm not okay with the parking staying. And I'm sorry, I will not support that amendment for that reason only.
Pam?
Yes. I have worked with the Winona State Pedestrian Safety Committee for several years now. Huff Street has always been a problem. It's hard for students to get across that street because there are so many cars up against the corner. If you drive down that street, it's amazing. Cars today are wider than they even painted for cars to be parked. They're wider. They're out into the passageway already. I think it's far too narrow for parking. I think we should remove the parking. I think the bike lane would be a good improvement for pedestrians and bikes. And in terms of parking for those businesses, let's find a way to move the parking either behind the buildings or around the corner. That's how I feel. So no, I'm not in favor of the amendment.
Eileen?
So since this is a pilot project, so for the purposes of the project, if it passes as is without the amendment, once the project is completed, if whatever the studies find, could that parking return?
As noted in the agenda item, we would come back to City Council and ask for guidance in terms of either pursuing a larger implementation or a more bolstered implementation using epoxy or some other paint that does not last just 6 months, or if the community or the City Council so wills it, we would reinstate parking.
Paul?
Do we have any way, so I've gotten a lot of calls and letters on this, as I'm sure we all have. So a couple of questions. Do we have any way of tracking the amount of cycling traffic that uses Huff Street or that part of that corridor?
We do. We actually currently track the usage of bicycles along that corridor using a heat map provided by Strava Metro. Strava Metro, and this is a little tough to see through the projection, but Strava Metro has roughly 1,000 people who use the app in the city of Winona, predominantly recreational runners, bikers, and even people who use the lakes. And where you see the darker red is actually where we have more substantial traffic. You'll note that a lot of it goes along Homer Road and East Lake Boulevard, which is the Mississippi River Trail, and then continues on Huff Street, which is the designated Mississippi River Trail as well, all the way up to Riverview Drive, which is one of the reasons why Huff Street was chosen predominantly. So we know that this is just from Q1 to Q3 of 2018, and we know that that's around 1,000 trips. The extrapolation rate, we're currently working to find an appropriate extrapolation rate. We don't have one here, but we could definitely put out counters as well as putting out survey cards. The survey cards were quite effective in the 2018 movement survey conducted by Engage Winona. So we would be using an adapted survey card, which is in your packet, and we found that we actually had higher bicycling and walking rates than the American Community Survey led us to believe. So we're closer to 22%.
The second question I have, so looking at this particular map, would you say that, so this is before the project, this is data from usage, and I use Strava and their equivalents, and I don't use Huff Street that often, but would you say that Huff for a north-south corridor is used more than Main Street, which is significantly wider?
I would say that Huff Street, based on Strava Metro data, does provide the key access point between the bluffs and the core of the city, and it is probably used at a similar rate to Main Street.
Any other street north-south from the levee that has more usage than Huff?
Not that I'm aware of.
Al?
A couple of points, I guess. You know, we're talking about numbers here, and I guess I'd like to know a traffic count, because there's probably more cars than traffic on Huff Street. Just for comparison's sake. And, you know, if we're really serious about making Huff Street a safer place to bicycle, then maybe what the city should do long-term is widen it again to make room for all of these bike lanes, or put some kind of facility that would allow a cyclist to be removed from the traffic itself, somewhere in the boulevard. I don't know how you do it, but widening the road might be the best solution that we have, and to isolate bikers from the traffic, from the people parking. And again, you know, enforcement is the key. Just today, again, I saw a semi drive down Huff Street, and that's not going to stop with this striping program. They're still going to be down Huff Street, and they're still going to be having conflicts because they're much larger vehicles than cars and other trucks are on Huff Street, and they're not supposed to be there. So again, it's an enforcement issue. It's perhaps long-term widening Huff Street to make sure we have room for all of the folks that use that road.
I think there'd be a lot of support for a protected bike lane on Huff Street.
Well, again, that's might solve some of these issues. Well, at least I see, and perhaps we've had calls on it.
With this whole bike striping pilot project, I support it, but I had the most calls on the Huff Street corridor. The business parking that could be taken away, the university and all those things. And I'm thinking to myself, now, what if we were to do this on 3rd Street in downtown, take the parking away? Would the business owners say anything to us? Would we hear them hot and heavy? And like I say, Huff Street, of course, is, it's a narrow street. It always has been. I agree with Al. You want to do something, let's widen it out. If we want bicycling done on Huff Street. I myself, I would not bicycle Huff Street. There's just simply too many people, too many cars, too much traffic. Then you have the train coming across. Like I said, I'm gonna support Al's amendment here. I support everything in here, or else we can just simply table the Huff Street corridor, get a little better understanding with it, because that's the biggest concern that all the people have. I've heard people take the parking away. I've heard people say leave the parking there. And it's kind of a split 50-50. So that's where I'm laying with it tonight. Eileen?
I know I seconded the motion, but I would prefer to adopt the pilot project as is without an amendment, because it is a pilot project, and my major concern is accessibility to specifically the church and Mugby on 9th, because that is the most active intersection that I see, and there were concerns from folks about parking for church on Sunday, because that's when they have increased amount of people there. And so I guess I would just ask that our law enforcement be diligent about parking enforcements in that area, so that those people aren't being burdened.
I'm confused if we're gonna pull the parking off of streets.
Well, I guess I'm thinking on the
side
sides.
streets?
Yeah.
On Sundays.
Well, I mean, during the business day as well. And I know there's handicap accessible parking on the sides, but
Yep, absolutely.
that was their concern. I just want to make
And the
sure that we're.
trucks.
Yeah.
And the trucks.
Michelle?
For me, again, I think it's the right corridor for a bike trail if you're going from one end of the city to the other, but it's not the issue for me. It's the parking safety issue, and it's student safety issue, and the exiting vehicle safety issue, and the crossing the intersection safety, and there's not enough line of sight with the cars parked how they are. I do like Mugby Jumpston's side where it's angled parking, and I think we should explore that against some of the side. I know that Al was opposed to it in the downtown, but actually I think it's worked really well. Not only does it calm down traffic, but it gives you the additional parking you need without taking up too much of the roadway. And I think maybe if we can, on the sides of some of those streets, look at that as a potential option. It works really well by Mugby. And that's where I usually park when I go there, because you couldn't park in the front, and even if you could, I wouldn't, because I don't want to be hit by a car. So, but I'm glad that you're thinking this is the way you want to go too.
Discussion. Any more? All right, we are voting first on the amendment, which is
To remove the parking.
Retain parking on Huff Street.
Retain the parking.
to retain the parking on Huff Street. Okay, there was a motion and a second made on that. All in favor of that amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
Aye.
Carried. Now we are back to.
No, it failed, not carried.
Denied.
It failed.
Motion failed.
Motion failed, right.
So you're back to the original.
Now we're back to the
Nice try,
original
George.
motion.
Give me this. You're getting a little too powerful.
Yeah. Okay, now what we are doing is,
The original motion.
the original motion is to propose the bike, I have it in the next
Approve
page.
as presented.
Yes.
Approve as presented. And I will probably, well, I'm for everything but Huff Street, so I don't know.
Toss a coin.
First of all, we have a motion on this, correct?
Yes.
And there's a second, whoever
Yes.
did that back then. Discussion, Paul.
Yeah, so once again, I mean, I don't believe any of us here on council are have avoided the calls in favor or opposed. And being a cyclist who actually doesn't use Huff Street very often, but this is why I asked about the data. And I think it is a good connection, and I really think we have two jewels in our system now. We have the levee and we have the bluff traverse system. And linking those two, I believe, is instrumental in enhancing their impact on outdoor recreation in our area, and not just transportation within the community. Also, I mean, we've shown earlier during our council meeting that and councilors, voted unanimously, or I believe we did, to support, a zoning change that supported infrastructure in our residential areas that encourages the use of bicycles for transportation. I would guess that House Street is a transportation route more than it is a recreation route. And I think it's, an opportunity to really learn from the pilot project. That said, this is a pilot project. I hope going forward that the community can invest more permanently in bicycle infrastructure, not just a pilot project.
Okay. Al?
Given my proposed amendment, and it failed, as I said earlier, however, I am in favor of the rest of the potential and the pilot project. So in that light, I will vote to support the amendment simply because it carries the whole project through, not the specific one that I've heard people object to. But I want to make the point clear that these are issues that need to be carried forward as this project goes forward, so we can understand its impact to those businesses and that whole area. So, as I say, I will support the motion today.
Eileen?
I'm very supportive of this as well, and I am still wary about the accessibility to the businesses. I think that part of making our community more friendly to alternative modes of transportations also means taking into account folks who have challenges with navigating the city. We've had conversations before about some of our curbs and the sidewalks and getting through crosswalks for people with walkers or wheelchairs and things like that. So I hope that we'll be really diligent about that and consider our community members who are mobility challenged. I don't want to make it more difficult for them to access businesses or services or church or anything like that.
Okay. Anyone else? All right. All those in favor of the bike striping pilot project signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed? Carried.
And moving on to item 5.7 is the resolution ordering assessment of costs for the 2019 sidewalk replacement project.
I'd make a motion to approve the attached resolution.
Motion by Michelle, seconded by Paul. Discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Carried.
Item 5.8, report on the assessment roll for the 2019 sidewalk project and the resolution to schedule the hearing on Monday, October 21st.
Make a motion to set the public hearing for Monday, October 21st.
Second. Motion moved by Michelle, seconded by Paul. Discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Carried.
Item 5.9, the resolution ordering assessment of costs for the 2019 miscellaneous utilities.
Make a motion to approve the attached resolution.
Second that.
Motion by Michelle, seconded by Pam. Discussion. All in favor of that matter signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Carried.
Item 5.10, a report on the assessment roll for 2019 miscellaneous utilities and the resolution to set the hearing for October 21st.
So moved.
Moved by Michelle.
Second.
Seconded by Paul. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Carried.
Item 5.11 is the Optum Healthcare Solutions contract with the Winona Friendship Center.
Make a motion to direct administration to execute the agreement.
Second.
Motion by Michelle, seconded by Eileen. Discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Carried.
Item 5.12 is the Bandshell Playground Lions Club bid authorization.
Make a motion to approve the attached resolution.
Second.
Moved by Michelle, seconded by Eileen. Discussion.
Chad, I think you said that we could review some of the plans. Is it possible to email those? Or do we have to come to Park and Rec? Not that I don't like Park and Rec, but I'm wondering if you could email them out just so we could see them.
Yeah, we'll make sure that we send it out to council.
once we have the 100% plans, which should be
Okay.
earlier, or should be later this week.
Okay, great, thanks.
Thank you.
I see they have some construction going down there already, so.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, actually, thanks for just mentioning that real quick. I should mention that we are behind schedule a bit with our, the Lions Club has been very patient with us. We ran into some water and some soil issues in that area this spring, and so it took us a bit to get to the point where we are right now, where we're actually doing removals, and we've cordoned off the area so that.
Chad, how many communities have a playground that is like this one that we're going to be putting in with the Lions' help?
Well, Mayor and Council, that'd be hard to answer. I would venture a guess that most communities our size have at least one.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we're contributing, besides $700,000 that the Lions has, we're also contributing as well, correct?
So that $700,000 amount includes our contribution, our cash contribution, our in-kind contribution.
Anyone else? All right. All those in favor of the Lions Club bid authorization signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Carried.
Item 7.1 is council concerns.
We'll start with Paul.
Well, you know, I'm not ready for anything this evening, so I'm going to pass.
I have nothing this evening either.
Okay, thank you. I just have a few items. First of all, I apologize for my aggressive start at the meeting for leaving the manager out, and just figured here, we want to get going, get into it. It's been quite an eventful evening and last night and today. And the reason I started reading these requests is because when I chairman the HRA meetings, I do what Monica does. I got to read the request and then bring it down, so I wasn't trying to take your job away, so. Just one thing is that I would like to welcome Ron Hornbaker. He is the new CEO of Barron's Manufacturing, and they have some big plans to expand that business, and Barron's, again, is a very aggressive company and very, very good, do a good product. So welcome him in his new position. And that's all I have. Michelle?
Nothing, I'm sorry, nothing.
Okay.
Okay. I'm happy that we are celebrating Welcoming Week. I'm excited for all the activities, and also so excited that we're seeing things coming up for new businesses and new activities going on in town. It's very exciting.
Al?
Just a reminder, Winona Senior High homecoming activities this weekend, I guess. There's a parade and a football game at Ball Heel Field, so be aware of that when you're traveling in that area. Also, I'd like to congratulate the Chuck Williams family. Chuck, a longtime broadcaster at KWNO, who I worked with not only at KWNO but also at HBC. He's been nominated and was accepted finally for induction into the Minnesota Broadcasting Hall of Fame. Quite an honor for his family, and I know it's too bad Chuck can't be here, because he's passed away, but he definitely made a contribution to Winona and Minnesota's radio history, and a well-deserved honor, and his family is very proud of that. So it was quite the honor for the guy I sort of who was my mentor when I was at KWNO. Thank you.
Okay, yes, Chuck certainly was the voice of Winona radio, all the local sports in the universities and colleges back then when he was broadcasting. I just want to add, this afternoon I had a great opportunity to go visit with the residents at Lake Winona Manor, at the Watkins home, and also at Callista Court, and it was a very, very good visit. And I kind of encourage all of us, you maybe have a spare half hour in a day, go over, see some of the people, and you will be surprised of all the people you know. So, anyway, all right.
And under the consent agenda, there are 8 items. The approval of the minutes from September 3rd, the adoption of an ordinance to rezone the Madison School property, an ordinance to establish 4-way stop at 4th and Caramona, an ordinance to install stop signs at Chatfield and Fourth and Steuben and Fourth, an ordinance to set the city fees for city services, including the summary publication, and 3 claims.
I'd move to.
The consent agenda?
Second.
Moved by Al, seconded by Michelle. Discussion? All in favor of the consent agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
I'd move we adjourn.
Oh, I was gonna take his line.
Second. Sorry, let me take my line.
Motion by Michelle to adjourn and seconded by Eileen. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Good
Al, I'm
evening.
sorry, but you were the voice